We got some really good news for you guys. If you guys are Anderson Silva fans like Mario, he is coming out of retirement and is becoming a boxer. Yeah, and I was pretty surprised too. When I heard he was coming out to fight again, I thought he was going back in the UFC ring. When I got the news about him going in a boxing match, I was like, wow, that's interesting. This is definitely something we gotta write down. He's set to face Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. But we'll talk about it when the time comes. It's gonna be in June, so that's a few months from now. But I figured this is a worthy topic because he's coming out. I know he announced his retirement from the UFC, but he's coming out to become a boxer now, which I find pretty interesting. So before I pass on to you, Mario, I just want to say this article was written by Salvador Rodriguez, who is an ESPN sports columnist. I think he's a Spanish he's a Spanish what do you call it? ESPN reporter. So I'll pass on to you now, Mario.
Yeah, well, first of all, good luck to Anderson Silva on his boxing match coming up on June 19th. Look, Nate, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm not a big fan of this. I'm not. I'm not, to be honest with you. I'll tell you
Okay,
why.
hear that.
Anderson Silva is regarded as one of the greatest MMA fighters to ever live, without a doubt. I mean, he was definitely one of the first ones. When I started watching like UFC and everything, he was definitely one of the first ones. He was in that class with like he was in that like era with like Chuck Liddell, Brock Lesnar was just coming in, um Tito Ortiz, John Jones, all these types of guys. He was in that era. And those are the guys I grew up watching right there. That's when I started watching the sport of UFC or MMA. Anderson Silva going into boxing, especially against a guy like Julio Cesar Chavez, I don't think it's a good idea. Or Chavez Jr., excuse me. First of all, Chavez Jr., I believe he is definitely years younger than him. I believe he is. I'm going to look it up right now. I feel like I know he is. Hang on a
Yeah, I
second.
think Anderson isn't Anderson Silva in like his 40s.
Yeah. Well, Chavez Jr. is 35, and Anderson Silva is, I believe, probably clocking in at
He's
45.
45.
So he's 10 years older. That's one. Number two, Anderson Silva, like I'm gonna keep it real with you, Nate. He's not a boxer. Like he's not. I'm sorry. Like he's
Yeah.
he's not. Let me tell you something. When he was in the UFC, the one thing I noticed about Anderson Silva, the one thing that you had to watch out for his kicks. His kicks were deadly. It was the kicks. It wasn't the punches. He'd come in. He'd like he'd distract you in so many ways. Move his hands around a lot, but he wouldn't like. But the punches weren't the thing you had to watch out for. It was the kicks. It was it was the knees that he was using. It was all that type of stuff. And don't get me wrong, Anderson Silva will forever be, I think, on that Mount Rushmore of UFC, on the UFC without a doubt, because he is the guy that a lot of people looked up to when they came into the UFC. You hear about it all the time. But when it comes to boxing, they are going up against a guy like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who is a very, very great boxer in his own right. I mean, obviously, his father, we don't got to talk about him. His father had like 80 straight wins without having a loss. So, like, but the son in general, here we're talking about a guy who's faced the best. We're talking about a guy who has faced Canelo. Did he beat Canelo? No. But he did fight Canelo. He's fought some of the best fighters there is to fight. So Anderson Silva going into this ring, I just don't think it's a good idea. I know it's an exhibition and everything like that, but like I just don't feel comfortable with it. Like, and I'd say the same thing if Chavez Jr. was stepping into an MMA octagon with Anderson Silva. It's not a good idea. Why? Because that's Anderson Silva's octagon right there. And don't get me wrong, if you would have asked me this 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, around the time like Conor McGregor like stepped foot into the boxing ring with Floyd Mayweather, if you would have asked me before that fight, I could have gave Anderson Silva a legit shot. Seeing how MMA fighters adapt to a boxing match, it's not really what you call ideal for an MMA fighter. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm not saying he don't have a chance of winning. But what I will say is, I think Anderson Silva. I just don't think this is a good idea for Anderson Silva to fight a guy not only 10 years younger than you, but who is also boxed longer, who is also more active than you. And you also got to remember, Anderson Silva has not had a win since Nick Diaz, which is a very, very long time ago. But you know what? Regardless of all that, Anderson Silva is still one of my favorite fighters. He still is one of my favorite fighters of all time. He might be my favorite fighter of all time, without a doubt. So with that being said, I do wish Anderson Silva the best of luck, and I'm curious to see how this fight's gonna go, but I'm not really too comfortable with it.
Yeah, neither am I. And obviously, I wish Anderson Silva the best of luck. When it comes to learning boxing, Mario, you also got to put it into perspective. He's got less than 3 months to prepare for this. As we
Right,
film this, it's March 31st, right? And his fight's on June 19th. That's less than 3 months. And to learn some boxing skills from in 3 months, it's not. You got to be honest, Mario. It's not a lot of time. Like
right.
a lot of people will say it is, but realistically, when it comes to sports and especially learning a new sport or something similar to it, anyways, I don't want to say it's completely different. It is
Right.
relatively similar in some aspect. It's still relatively not a lot of time when you really
Right.
think
And I'm
about
not saying he don't and I'm not saying he don't know like how to box. Like that's not
it.
what I'm
Right.
saying. That wasn't his biggest thing. Like I'm not saying his punches weren't nothing in the UFC.
Right.
Obviously they
Yeah.
were. But your boxing his boxing is just not at that level of a Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. It's
Yeah.
not because that's all he's been doing.
Right. And also, one thing I want to mention is like you also got to remember he's switching other sports, and like we talk about greats. Michael Jordan is a perfect example of this. After his basketball career, he went to play baseball for the White Sox. He wasn't so successful. I can't remember if he went back to basketball after that. I can't
Yeah, he went
remember.
back.
Did
He
he?
went back. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. I'm trying to think. I know Tim Tebow went from football to baseball, and he wasn't so
Yeah.
successful with that. Like you got I don't know, man. Like, I look at it in the past, like, can he succeed? Yeah, he can. But I don't know, like, especially from my analytic point of views, when you think of players like Deion Sanders, you can make a case for him too. But I think he was
Yeah.
a little bit more successful. But um,
Right. But the difference between the sports you just mentioned and Anderson Silva's case, I'll say this in like defense for Anderson Silva. MMA and boxing, they're both combat sports.
yeah, right,
Baseball and basketball or baseball and football, they have a whole two they're two very different purposes.
right,
Boxing and
absolutely,
MMA, your job is still to hurt the dude,
yeah,
That's still your job, despite which sport you're in. That's your but again, MMA only sets you because when you do MMA for so long, Nate, you learn so many new skills. It's
yeah,
not that you forget how to box. It's that you're so accustomed to fighting to attribute to those skills that when it's time for you to box, it's completely different. Like
right,
it's just completely different. Like Conor McGregor started out as a boxer. Look where you see him in that Floyd Mayweather fight. He don't look too well. He don't look too much like a boxer. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So like, when you step into that ring, it's a whole different story.
I'll say this though, maybe this dude Anderson Silva could have been practicing boxing behind the scenes. Some athletes do things that the media doesn't know about.
That's a point right
Yeah,
there. That's
keep
a
that in
point.
mind. Keep that in mind. Maybe he's been practicing for all these years and now he wants to come in and do it. Maybe that is
Right.
the case.
That's a point. And
But
and I mean we don't know that, but it's a
exactly,
good
yeah, that's why I'm
good
saying
point.
that. But maybe he could be doing it behind the scenes. Maybe this is actually his first time trying to go into the boxing world. Who knows? But I mean, me personally, it's not a good idea. Well, obviously age is a factor now. You're going into another sport, but I just think that training for boxing in less than 3 months, if you didn't do the training already, I just don't think that's enough time. Me personally, I don't think, especially when you're learning a new sport, that is like a lot of people outside of sports will say it's a lot of time, and it is. 3 months is a pretty long time in outside side, but when it comes to sports, it's really not a long time. Those months just come and go like it's nothing. But with that being said, I'm not gonna talk down Anderson Silva. Obviously, this dude would beat me in anything. I would get my ass kicked by him, so I'm not gonna talk down on him. But I do want to wish him the best of luck in the boxing world. I hope he does see success in boxing, and I'm excited to see him fight in a new way.